College football is fast approaching, and no one better to get down than the godfather of college football previews himself, Phil Steele, coming on to talk all things SEC football. Hello, everyone. I'm Lucas Hill. This is SEC Live here at the Voice of College Football. Make sure you do us a favor, hit the like, share, and subscribe button, and turn on all notifications every time we post a new video. Go live, post a new short on SEC at the Voice of College Football. Phil Steele's here, 30-plus years in the college football preview business. Phil, thank you for taking the time to come talk with us, brother. We appreciate you doing this.
Hey, real pleasure. Always enjoy talking SEC football.
Phil, we got a lot to talk about today, but first, before we get into specific teams, we want to talk about your preseason All-SEC, specifically on the offensive side of the ball. When I look at the running back room, you have your first team as Jaden Ott and Trey Wisner. Second team comes from Ahmad Hardy from Missouri and Le'Veon Moss, Nate Frazier from Georgia, and Caden Durham round out third team. And then your fourth guys are Devon Booth and Jam Miller. AJ Baxter's coming back from injury this year. You obviously have guys like Jaden Blue. It's a deep Texas running back room, no question about it. But is there any team that you also had in that running back room that you could be in favor of potentially reaching that All-SEC team at the end of the day?
Oh, naturally. I mean, the SEC is loaded with talent. There are so many VHTs in this conference that you could pick numerous players. You have to go with guys that have had the production for the most part. But, yeah, the SEC is so deep. If I could probably name 15 guys that are possible All-SEC candidates at running back.
I think so amazing. Just it's not just Texas, but just seeing the amount of talent at the running back position in all around the SEC, and just seeing the history behind that and seeing what you're going to expect from now. But it almost seems like we need to slap the running back label off of them and just label them as just athlete at this point going forward. But that's just a side get into your predictions around the SEC. You have Georgia winning the SEC again. I have Alabama winning that one. Tell me what you've seen from Georgia and why you think they're going to be back on top of the SEC despite all that you lost from last year on the defensive side of the ball, all the improvement that you've seen from what they got in the transfer portal, especially at receiver this past year, but having an unproven quarterback in a guy like Gunnar Stockton.
Yeah, and first of all, I think Gunnar Stockton's probably going to give that Georgia offense a little something they lacked last year, which is mobility out of the quarterback position. So that's a plus. I think Georgia's flying a little bit under the radar. Now, if you look at my power poll in the front of the magazine, I actually have Texas number 3 in the power poll, which is the third most talented team in the country. I've got Alabama number 4, and I've got Georgia number 7. So you're probably saying, well, why'd you pick Georgia number 1? Well, let's take a look at last year. Georgia's 3 toughest opponents last year were Alabama, Ole Miss, and Texas. They had to play all 3 of those teams on the road. And guess what? They lost 2 of those games. It's tough to win on the road. Well, this year, their toughest 3 opponents are Ole Miss, Alabama, and Texas. They get all 3 at home between the hedges. They haven't lost at home this decade. Last loss was 2019, 5 straight undefeated years at home. So getting those teams at home, I think, is a huge advantage for Georgia, and the reason I picked them to top the standings in the regular season. When you look at a team like Alabama, I don't disagree with this, a loaded team. In fact, last year when Kalen DeBoer took over, he was replacing Nick Saban. So you had a lot of guys where, hey, Nick Saban did it this way. You're Kalen DeBoer. And there's a lot of, maybe he didn't have a complete team last year. Well, this year, take a look at the players they lost in the transfer portal. Hardly anybody. Practically the whole team's bought in this year. It's a second year for Kalen DeBoer. His second year at Washington, he took a less talented team all the way to the national title game. I rank Alabama in my top 10 in every single unit, with the exception of quarterback, but I think Ty Simpson's going to do well. He looked good in the Manning Passing Academy and has done well this spring. You look at the rest of the offense, defense, loaded with NFL caliber guys. My biggest question mark, and the only game I have an underdog all season, they have to go to Georgia and win between the hedges, and that's why I've got them at 11-1 this year. So I think that both teams very capable, but Georgia's got the best schedule, much like the best schedule had Georgia losing, or the schedule had Georgia losing 2 games in the regular season last year, despite being a very talented team.
Yeah, I have Alabama going 11-1 this year. The only difference is I have them losing at Willie B. I like what they have on the defensive line, but I mean, going into that environment, I think that's going to be a fueled South program, and I think they're going to be able to at least one that many people think they're not supposed to win one, but I think it's going to be one that in that type of environment with that type of atmosphere, knowing what Alabama has to face, I think it might be their only loss of the season. But let me ask you this on the subject of Alabama. Between Ohio State and Bama, who do you think is the most talented team between the two with a young quarterback at the helm?
I'm going to go with Alabama over Ohio State. Ohio State lost 14 players the NFL draft, which is big. Alabama only lost 7. And like I said, Alabama didn't lose anybody to the transfer portal hardly. So they're in really good shape there. I think Bama is a more complete team than is Ohio State. And that's why in the power poll in the front of the magazine, I rank Alabama ahead of Ohio State.
Greater expectations for Kalen DeBoer, obviously going into year 2. What is the strength that you've seen so far from Alabama? I know their entire linemen. I mean, when you talk about 5 top 50 guys on the offensive line with Parker Browlis for Caden Proctor and Jaden Roberts, your defensive line is loaded, led by LT Overton and many other guys that are going to break out this year. Who do you have as kind of an under the radar type of guy that not a lot of people are talking about on this Bama roster?
Boy, everybody's talking about Ryan Williams, that's for sure. I'm going to go up front on the D line, maybe a guy that's going to emerge this year because everybody knows LT Overton and Tim Keenan. I think Keenan is a guy that's going to be one of the top interior linemen in the country. I'm going to go with his partner inside, James Smith. Not a lot of folks talking about him. I think James Smith, with the fact that defense is going to have to be watching for Overton, watching for Keenan, that's going to give some opportunities. James Smith, you can't double team everybody on the front. So watch for James Smith to have an unexpectedly good year this year.
Going to be fun watching Bama on that front 4. I really love what Kane Womack and company has done with that entire defense. Oklahoma, you're very high on. I have Oklahoma going 7-5 in my record predictions. Obviously, the big difference is obviously what you got in the portal. Jaden Ott, John Mateer, and not to mention you get your offensive coordinator in Ben Arbuckle. I've talked with a couple of OU insiders that say that the pairing of those two combined with what you have already on the defensive side of the ball, knowing that Brent Venables is taking over play calling, not that there was anything bad with the defense last year, but you start to feel like there's some sort of stability within that Oklahoma locker room as a whole now compared to what you had late last year in 23 and all of last year on the offensive side of the ball. What are your expectations for John Mateer going into the SEC, transitioning from an offense that pretty much dominated against the Pac-12 last year, going into a much tougher conference in the SEC?
I think when you look at Oklahoma this year, they're my number one surprise team in the country. With the Sooners, there's no question about their defense. Our Mason Thomas up front, Kendall Daniels. I mean, they're loaded defensively. That last year they held opponents to 87 yards per game below their season average, number 6 in the country. They got 8 starters back. As you mentioned, Venables calling the plays. There's no doubt about that defense. Now, offensively for Alabama, or for Oklahoma, last year was a disaster, but they had 0 returning starters on the offensive line. And then their top 5 receivers get injured. And I'm going to take you to Clemson for a moment. 2 years ago, Clemson with Cade Klubnik had their top 3 receivers go out in the first 2 games of the season in preseason. And he had just 19 touchdowns and 9 interceptions because his receiving core was average. Well, last year he got those injured players back, plus they added to it. And all of a sudden, Cade Klubnik looks like one of the best quarterbacks in the country. 36 touchdowns, just 6 interceptions. Well, you're going to see that with Oklahoma. They get a guy like Deion Burks back. He missed a good portion of last year with injury. He's an NFL prospect. They get all the injured players back. They add in players. They go from below average on receiving core to above average. The offensive line goes from inexperienced to experienced. Those are two massive upgrades offensively. Then, as you mentioned, bringing in Jay Nott at running back. He was the best running back in the Pac-12 2 years ago. Bringing in John Mateer at quarterback. And bringing in Arbuckle as the offensive coordinator, they're going to have a vastly upgraded offense this year. Then take a look at the schedule. Remember last year they only had 3 SEC home games. Well, this year they only have 3 true SEC road games because the Texas game's at a neutral site. They get that big game against Michigan at home, which I expect them to win. I've got Oklahoma a playoff contender this year, so I'm 7 would be light for me. I know their over-under in Vegas is 6.5. I'm pounding the over on that thing. I think Oklahoma's got a chance of going from 6 and 7 to making the playoffs this year.
Who else in the SEC do you have as a dark horse to make the college football playoff?
I'm going to go with Texas A&M as the other team to look at. And, it's interesting. When I talked to Coach Elko last year and went over the offensive line with him, he said, Phil, we're middle of the road in the SEC offensive line. This year, when I went over the offensive line, he said, Phil, we're top tier SEC offensive line. In fact, we're a Joe Moore Award contender. They also have Marcel Reed, now a veteran quarterback. They've got 3 running backs who could be the feature running back almost anywhere. You were talking about depth of running backs before. Le'Veon Moss, Reuben Owens, Amari Daniels, any 3 of those guys could be all SEC, especially running behind that offensive line. Defensively, they are top notch. And the thing about Mike Elko, he's overachieved all 3 years that I've covered him, the 2 years at Duke and then last year at Texas A&M. And remember last year, A&M, the final game of the season, they're playing Texas. Winner of that game goes to the SEC title game. So they were nearly there last year. Watch out for A&M. They could be that team this year.
Marcel Reed, the one knock that I think a lot of people have on him is that he's a running back playing the role of quarterback. And I think he's going to step up this year. I think he showed out a little bit in big moments, especially what you saw against LSU. I think South Carolina is when he started to get happy feet. He started to really kind of panic a little bit whenever it came to read options. But going back to that option game, I think Marcel Reed's still going to be one of the best in the SEC. When you look at the option game of the SEC, it feels like it's going to be taking over all around the SEC this year with Marcel Reed in the court running back room that they have, with Arch Manning in the running back room that they have, Jaden Nott and John Mateer, DJ Lagway and Jaden Ball. When you look at where they are as a whole with this option game, who do you think could be one of the top running back quarterback duos in the SEC at the end of the year?
Well, I mean, you just mentioned a bunch that could easily be there. I think you do have to look. I'm going to go with A&M. I think Reed's going to run more than the other guys. The other guys are all mobile, but I think you're going to see Reed running more. And as mentioned, they've got 3 running backs. Take your pick. Le'Veon Moss, Reuben Owens, Amari Daniels. Any one of those guys could be the feature running back. So I think quarterback, running back wise, I'm going to go with the Aggies, especially running behind that offensive line.
I played against Le'Veon Moss in high school. When I say that he is as advertised, and this isn't just from what you've seen from the college tape, I haven't seen him in person. He is a load to tackle. I'm glad that he's back for another year. I know it sucked that he got hurt last year, but I think he could definitely make a name for himself as I wouldn't necessarily say comeback player of the year around the SEC, but a guy that I think could definitely contend for an all SEC / breakout star in going into the NFL draft. I do want to touch on one thing that you do have. You have South Carolina near the bottom of the SEC. A lot of optimism coming back. Lenore Sellers comes back as a Heisman contender. But you did lose, I think, maybe 4 or 5 real stars that you have going to the NFL draft in Demetrius Knight, Nikki Minwari, Kyle Kennard, Tonka Hemingway, and TJ Sanders, who are now gone. Talk to me about South Carolina's development, what your expectations of them are, because I've been real with South Carolina fans. 7-5, 8-4 is what you need to expect at the end of the day to get your hopes not completely crushed at the end of the day.
Yeah, and let's take a look at the SEC, because you said I haven't picked towards the bottom. I mean, being picked 10th in the SEC, they're still ahead of teams like Auburn and Arkansas. The SEC is loaded. I mean, how do you pick anybody at the bottom of the conference? They're not really at the bottom. I've got them number 10, but last year I was higher.
I should say bottom tier.
Okay. Well, I put it in the middle because I still think that they're a team they got Superman at quarterback and Lenora Sellers. I think the SEC is the deepest conference because of that. If I've got South Carolina 10th, I've got Minnesota 10th in the Big Ten. I'll take South Carolina over Minnesota. I think the SEC is a deeper conference. But let's dive into South Carolina. Last year, they were coming off a 5-7 season, and I had them higher than everybody else. I was a big South Carolina fan all year. In fact, people ask me every year, they say, Phil, who's your favorite team? I go, I have one. They're like, who? And I'm like, it's a team I pick higher than everybody else. So I was a South Carolina fan last year. I was wearing South Carolina shirts to work and very happy with their season. In fact, I thought they should have been in the playoffs. Lenora Sellers, phenomenal QB. They've got Oscar Attaway and Faison. Hopefully Faison's there. He just got cleared for practice. That's a big plus. But I am concerned with the defensive front seven. I thought last year they had maybe one of the most dominant defensive front sevens in college football, and they lose the bulk of that. Now, yes, they have got Dylan Stewart back, but Dylan Stewart was Dylan Stewart because teams had to concentrate on all the other players they had up front. I think they're going to be weaker there, but the schedule is really the thing that bothers me. They play the fourth toughest schedule in the country. You look at road games at Missouri, at LSU, at Ole Miss, at Texas A&M. Let's face it, they're going to be an underdog in all four of those games. Yes. Then they host Clemson, which I have one of the top teams in the country. They host Alabama, one of the top teams in the country. They host Oklahoma, my number one surprise team. And, oh, by the way, they play Virginia Tech at a neutral site. So that is an absolutely brutal schedule. They do have Superman. If he stays healthy, look out. They should have beaten LSU last year. They got robbed in that game, especially that penalty call at the end of the game. But I think South Carolina probably takes a step back this year due to a weaker defensive front seven. Last year's was at the very top. This year's is going to be good, but not at the very top. And then the schedule is just something that I think it's going to be tough to navigate.
A couple more things for you, Phil, before we let you go, brother. I'm glad you mentioned LSU because I want to transition to them for a bit. It's year 4 now for Brian Kelly. Now it's D-Day. It was D-Day, I would say, even last year with the that you have with the 12 team. Now it's really D-Day. You dominated the portal, number portal class in the country. You had a lot that you got from high school recruiting. You return probably one of the front runners for the Heisman Trophy in Garrett Nussmeier. Defensively, you have some depth. You're returning Blake Baker, who had a pretty good year calling plays last year on the defensive side of the ball. Let's say that this program goes 9-3, 8-4 this year, which I don't think they will. I do have them going 10-2. This is a relatively favorable schedule if you're LSU. But let's say in a hypothetical situation, we'll think worst case scenario, LSU goes 8-4. Is this something where LSU fans are going to have to be complacent until it's time for contract renewal time? Or is it something that, let's say they do end up going 10-2, they exceed expectations, they make the college football playoff. Are fans going to be complacent with at least a college football playoff appearance?
Yeah, I think it's probably playoffs or bust here, especially with everything LSU put into this season. They have to make the playoff. Now, I look at their schedule. It is very manageable, but there are some games where they're going to be an underdog. They're going to be an underdog at Clemson, possibly at Ole Miss, and then definitely at Alabama. And I feel at Oklahoma. I think Oklahoma is loaded this year. So those are 4 pretty tough road games. And if they drop those 4 or drop 3 and don't make the playoff, then I think, expectations are high right now for the LSU fan base. They're not going to be a happy bunch.
Phil, having been around Baton Rouge for a while, my mind is boggled just with the high expectations that they have and the ferocity that they have around a program that is really going to just be up in arms if, let's say they drop one game, it's like it's D-Day there. It feels like a war zone around LSU fans. They're ready to fire a coach, but I think that goes to the high expectations that they have year in and year out. You're expected to be a college football playoff, especially with the extended playoff. And I'm curious to see what strides have they made to improve on the defensive side of the ball? That's the one thing that I do want to emphasize whenever we get to ball playing time, because if they don't have a guy at the end of the day on the defensive side of the ball, I have Harold Perkins, not really a guy that I think is going to break out. I do have him maybe as an average, maybe even above average player, but when he's on, he's on. That's the number one thing that you have to consider whenever it comes to where LSU is at on the defensive side of the ball. Last one for you, Phil, the Auburn Tigers. This could be an either-or season. They could exceed expectations, go win 10 games, and make the college football playoff. But on the other hand, you have them, what do you have them, 11th, Phil? But you
Tied
have
for
them.
10th. Tied for
you have
10th.
them 10th?
Yeah, tied for 10th.
Okay. And they could end up going 4-8 or 5-7 this year. What is going to be the difference for Auburn to potentially get over that hump and get over their decade that has been mirrored in mediocrity?
Well, last year I put Auburn on my most improved list, and they actually went from being minus 45 yards per game in SEC play to plus 62 yards per game in SEC play last year. So they showed the improvement I expected, but it didn't show up on the scoreboard. They only finished 5-7 due to a massive amount of turnovers they had in some games. So I think they do have to cut down on the turnovers. They were -9 last year. But you take a look at Jackson Arnold. Now, I talked about Oklahoma earlier. I said Oklahoma didn't have an offensive line. Oklahoma's top 5 receivers were banged up, and Jackson Arnold struggled. Well, Jackson Arnold now steps into a situation where he's got my number 6 set of receivers in the country. Cam Coleman, Eric Singleton, dynamic duo there. He's got my number 12 offensive line in front of him. So Jackson Arnold is going to look like the Jackson Arnold you expected him to have. Defensively, they're solid in all 3 units, and they're also solid in special teams. You look at the schedule this year, I think they'll be an underdog, at the slight underdog at Baylor. Well, no, they're actually the favorite at Baylor, but at Oklahoma, at Texas A&M, home to Georgia, and then possibly at Arkansas, and then the big game in Jordan-Hare. They've always played Bama tough at home. So that's going to be a key. I do think they have playoff potential, but we got to see it happen on the field with Hugh Freeze. So I have them tied for 10th in the SEC. I think there's some games they're going to lose this year, but they are a dangerous team, that's for sure.
Going to be a fun season around the SEC. Phil Steele continuing to produce the Bible of college football, going 31 years strong. You can pick up your Phil Steele College Football Preview magazine over at philsteele.com. You can also check out Phil on Twitter as well. Phil, always a pleasure, man. Thank you for hopping on with us here at SEC Live at the Voice of College Football. Tell us where we can also find some of your other work, brother. We are looking forward to seeing some more.
Yeah, first of all, the magazine is only available at Barnes & Noble and Books A Million, 360 pages, like getting 136 media guides rolled into one. Or you can order it online at philsteele.com. And when you order it online, I'm going to charge you a shipping charge. We give you the digital magazine for free, and the digital magazine's actually updated all the way through September. Now, we also have online at philsteele.com an FCS magazine where we've got your Southeastern Lions, 2 full pages on each team there. And then we've got an NFL magazine with 4 full pages on each NFL team. And Lucas, you want to talk about Southeastern for a minute?
Why not?
Let's hit it. Well, last year they won 6 of their last 7 games. They've got their 8th-year head coach in Frank Selfo. I'm a little concerned that offensively, they only averaged 22.8 points per game last year. They lose their quarterback, their top running back, and their top receiver. But they do bring in Carson Camp, who was originally at South Dakota. He's got 4,000 yards career passing and spent the last 2 years at Sac State. Defensively, they gave up 25 points per game, which was their best mark since 2015. Should be improved there. In the Southland Conference, we've got them picked 3rd. So I think it's going to be a decent season for Southeastern. But if you'd like this type of information on all of the FCS teams, 2 full pages on each FCS team, just go to philsteele.com and get the FCS magazine. It's digital only, but it's up right now.
Phil, we appreciate the time, man. Thank you so much for hopping on with us. Have a great rest of the day, man.
All right, a lot of fun talking football with you today, Lucas.